The different criteria that I use for selection, the things that I look at when I purchase materials for our libraries, the reviews, the age appropriateness, curricular needs, all those types of things. So there are details about those things in our policy. And then also it includes a reconsideration of materials policy so that if we did have a challenge arise in our district where something that is in the library was questioned, we have a process in place as to how we would deal with that challenge. Okay? And then finally, the last section deals with the weeding of materials, or how we remove materials from the library when they are no longer relevant, in poor condition, out of date, et cetera. Okay? So we updated that policy this year, submitted it to the board, and I believe it's been submitted for the first reading. Is that where we are with it right now, right? And we've had a little bit of a complication arise. Some of you may have heard that last week our governor signed into effect House Bill 2789, which the media is saying will effectively end book banning in Illinois. It is a bill to help deal with many of the book challenges that have been cropping up in other states and to help prevent some of that from happening here in Illinois. Now, the reason that impacts us, of course, is because part of our policy deals with how our district would deal with a book challenge should that arise. And since this bill was just signed last week, it's a little early on to know exactly what the state expects of us. They're giving us a couple of different options as to how we move forward from here. But the details of that and what exactly that will look like on paper for us is still a little bit unclear. So right now, according to the professional groups that I belong to and what I've heard from our regional library system, the State Library of Illinois is developing guidelines for us. We should have those hopefully within a few months. This bill goes into effect January 1st, and we need to comply with this in order to receive our state school library grant funds that we receive from the State Library of Illinois each year. So at this time, we're kind of hitting pause because we need a little bit more information before we know exactly what changes we will need to make or additions we'll need to make to the policy that we've developed. So we're hoping that we will have that information by this fall, be able to present that to you, and then move forward with this policy. So that's kind of where we stand right now. Do you have any questions about any of that? Okay, all right. Then I will probably see you again in a few months when we have a little bit more to talk about. Thanks.
This better be great. I mean, it's going to be entertaining. I'm not ready for that. I know, slacker. Are you gonna do buttons while I talk at first? Okay.
I'd love to.
Kind of feel bad. I feel like I'm gonna be standing behind you talking to your back. You okay? Okay.
Yeah, I'll be okay.
Okay.
I'm definitely with you.
I don't want you to be offended.
That's okay, I can't hear anything.
Okay, I'll try to scream.
Better. Your attention spans are only good for 8 minutes. Right. No, that was the intention. Yeah. Professional stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Should have worked this Mexican accent in here.
One that sold me a bit more than I had.
I could fill in this space by telling you all about our junior high play that we had in May. It was fantastic, like super, super well attended, like almost 200 people in the, well, no, closer to like 300 because I made 100 programs and they were all gone. And then I made 75 more and they were all gone. And then I made 125 for Sunday. And then I made another 50 more and they were all gone. So either there are a lot of programs just like propping things up over at Mansfield, or we had almost, what is that, 300 and some people. So it's very, very exciting. I think that was our. I think they probably all came to see Charlie to the Pancho Villa. We've been out in the community lately, and people have stopped my son like at Dollar General and places like that, and they're like, "Say the line, and they make him do his Pancho Villa voice. So that's funny.
Okay, we're ready to get started, yes. Yes, yeah, nice filling. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Paige Trimble. I'm the curriculum coordinator in the district, and this is Carissa Yeagle, and she is our 7th grade ELA teacher. And we have been doing some really exciting work over the past 2 years, which included all of our ELA teachers from 7th to 12th grade, and we've titled this presentation, The Plot Thickens. And as you see there, that is a plot map that as I'm a former ELA teacher. This was something that, we referenced a lot as we were reading stories or novels where we can plug each of these components in. And so when Chris and I were trying to think of a way that we could present the important work, and really a lot of hard work and effort that went into it, but also wanted to make it maybe a little more creative than what maybe a typical presentation might be. So we're going to start out with what every plot map has, and that is the exposition of a story. So the beginning of a story is the exposition, where you learn a little bit more about the characters and the setting of the story, and you usually get a little taste, a preview of what that conflict is going to look like. So as you can see, we have our main characters that were part of this hard work. I did not pick my character, however, Raquel Eshelman, who is sitting right over there, wave. She's here for a different reason tonight, but just so happened it was ELA presentation night. You've heard me reference her a lot. She's our literacy coach from the regional office. Myself was part of the team, and then this year at the junior high, we had Carissa as our 7th grade ELA representative, and Amanda Moore as 8th grade, and then Kendra Jones, who this year was 10th and 11th, next year will be 10th and 11th 11th grade. And then Lauren Lacey will be 9th and 12th grade. As we've talked about in the past few months, she'll be our dual credit instructor next fall. So we're really excited about that. So those are the characters, or our team, who have been working together. And so now we'll move to the setting, which is a tale of two buildings, really the exposition. Once upon a time, the ELA departments at Blue Ridge High School and Blue Ridge Intermediate and Junior High School existed independently, separate realms of literary genius. But that led to struggles and indeed some disputes, right? Okay, which leads us to what some of the conflicts were. So, you may have heard in a classroom or a teacher's lounge, that was my book. I can't believe they're teaching that book. That's my book. Or, I was teaching Poe, the nerve. Or, if you walked in a classroom, you might hear a student saying, we have to read Romeo and Juliet again. We already read this in junior high, twice. Noun, verb, adjective, I don't even know what those are. Now, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but indeed, we did not have a standard grammar curriculum that was focusing on the standards from 7th to 12th grade. The junior high teachers didn't teach us MLA style. We like to call that complaint the mom and dadding us. When they get to high school, they say, the junior high teachers didn't teach us anything. We don't know what MLA style or format is. But indeed, they were taught that. But we didn't have those lines of communication before, and so there was no way of the high school teachers knowing what was happening in the junior high. And then this question has come about a couple times, but there really wasn't a formal process. My parents say I'm not allowed to read this book. Now what am I supposed to do? And so part of this hard work was coming up with a format of steps that we would take when there was a novel maybe, or a story that maybe for some reason or another, a parent wasn't comfortable having their child read. And so we wanted to have a process where an alternative text could be selected. And so Chris is going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then the last thing, I don't have time to teach everything. There wasn't any vertical alignment, and so really the teachers were taking it on themselves, feeling that they needed to teach every standard from 7th to 12th grade, when really we know that those should have been staggered, building on top of one another, and they don't have to teach everything. And so those were some really important, tough conversations that we had to have. And Chris is going to lead you kind of on the rising action of how we solved some of these items.
Thank you. So, as a team, we set off on this adventure. It was like we packed our little satchels full of the things that we would need, and we launched into this adventure here. And so we talked about different things like vocabulary, not just how do we teach vocabulary, but also like what is the terminology that I'm using and how is that similar or different to what they need in the high school. We traveled on through the standard C, so we figured out how we were not just teaching the text because, like, let's say that I love Romeo and Juliet. Well, I can't just teach that. It can't be all about, do they know who Mercutio? Help me out. Mercutio, thank you. I was mixing Taming of the Shrew, and you can clearly tell that I don't really read Romeo and Juliet all the time. Yeah, write that down, Krista, in the minutes. Carissa Yeagle admits to not reading Shakespeare. So we spent a lot of time talking about all of these different things, like the overlapping texts. We talked about grammar and what am I teaching in 7th grade, what's happening before 7th grade, how are we building. We talked about different rigor and the expectations that we needed. We talked about, well, are we teaching MLA? Are we teaching APA? Are we teaching Chicago style? No, right? We're just going to stick with one and call that a day, that kind of thing. All of this path kind of led us finally over to like communication point is kind of where we ended up, which is really nice because it seems silly that in a district our size, we were not able to be like talking to each other regularly. But the truth of it is that if I send an email to the high school, that's just an email. Like there was never a face or a voice or a personality to go with that. And now we've reached a point where we really are like 4 or 5 little people on a journey, like traveling all of this together. So, yes, and meeting quarterly so that we can co-plan and bounce ideas off of each other and really communicate about, like, this is where I am and this is where I want to be. How do you think I can trim it or expand it to make it fit my needs and to make sure that we're getting where we want them to be? So in terms of the alternative book C over here, that's what Paige kind of mentioned, that it's not that we're teaching books that are necessarily like triggers for people, but we do know that there are some students who have some struggles that maybe these books deal with, and we don't want to set them off, or their parents are not on board with that. So we were able to talk about, number one, how do we decide on what kind of a novel we're going to teach, and how do we make sure that that novel is hitting our standards, that it's not just that I really love this book. But then also, like, what happens if we run into a situation where a student and their parents don't want them to read this book? So we kind of set down in place the process of choosing a novel that is worthy of a study like that, but then also, what are we going to do to compensate if people need that? So, yes. And so, you're probably wondering, well, all of this rising action is leading somewhere, and what is going to happen? We are finally, you guys, at the climax and the falling action of our story. So this is essentially the work that we completed in the last couple years. So importantly, we vertically aligned that curriculum, so I can say this is what I'm teaching, and this is what my focus standards are for each unit. So we don't get to junior year and they say, Mrs. Yeagle never taught us how to write a paragraph. This is insane, because now they can say, no, they have, and I can call her on the phone if you want to talk to her right now about it. So that vertically aligned curriculum is so huge. The grammar component that we've added right now is going to be really, really amazing as well. It's Patterns of Power. The school board, you approved that. Thank you. It's fantastic. I'm excited to launch that this year. We also were able to sit down and really talk about the standards and what they mean. And Raquel over there, wave Raquel, hello. Raquel is like our fairy godmother in this story. She would come with our standards, and she highlighted the bits that were different as they built so that you could see that, okay, 6th grade says you'll cite evidence. 7th grade says several pieces of evidence. 8th grade says the best evidence that specifically targets what you're trying to prove. And so it was nice to see that as it built, because sometimes you get stuck thinking, like, what's the point of this? Like, they already know how to say such and such or how to cite this evidence, but seeing that alignment and being able just to look at, like, what was different was very powerful. We were also able to talk about common terminology and just changing a few, like, discrepancies and a few words that we used really, I think, changed my instruction this year, and I feel like I've sent them to the high school much better prepared. And then that communication, again, we've been working on a protected grade level reading list, which is nice too, so that they aren't reading the same short story every single year in a row. There's something to be said, I think, and Paige and I have talked about this, about rereading a text for a different purpose, but not the same text every single year. And so if you get a chance to look at that list, you'll see that it's very different and varied, and we're trying to give our students a really great experience. And then, of course, we worked on that process for alternate texts. And so,
Okay, so our resolution, what started out as a tale of 2 separate and isolated kingdoms, has now become a fairy tale of 2 unified buildings with a common vision to increase student achievement and engagement.
oh wait, there's more.
There's more.
Do you want to hear more about our quest for the alignment? Yes, 5 stars, highly recommend, would do it again. Can't wait for the sequel. Which is good because
There we go. Coming the fall of 2023, The Fellowship of the Content, the thrilling sequel to the tale of 2 buildings. We will have conversations about assessments. We will start having the conversations of how we can incorporate more student conferencing and voices in our classroom, which goes along with fostering classroom discussions. We'll continue to work on and filling identified gaps in the curriculum. We'll continue to increase rigor at all levels, questioning strategies for our depth of knowledge, and then finally to continue to implement the grammar focus using patterns of power. So we have a lot of work to do still, but I'm really pleased and thankful for the team that we've had putting this together. So that's it. Questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Okay, up next we have the bond presentation with Steve Adams.
Thanks for setting the bar pretty high there.
I can sing for you in the background if you want, like sound effects.
Hold on to that idea. I'll point and
I got you.
there you go. For those of you that I have not met before, my name is Steve Adams. I'm with PMA Securities. We act as the financial or the municipal advisor to the district when looking at possible debt issuances. And I've been asked by Dr. Standifer to come in and kind of explain, you know, you guys are in a very unique situation right now that, you know, not a lot of districts can say. Well, I guess more and more every day are getting the wind farm EAVs and the like. But you're in a very good position now because yours are actually up and going, and you've got a number that you can base some of these estimates and projections off of to see what it will look like in the future as you move forward and you know, tackle some of the projects that you've got on your wish list or just have to be done, you know, the health life safeties and projects like that. I guess I should, Hillary, did you want to lead in with anything before I kind of start explaining what I brought this evening?
Yeah, maybe I'll just say this. So what I asked Steve to put together was, we've talked about the need to issue our HLS bonds, our health life safety bonds, and the number that we're looking at there for the projects at all three buildings, $3.13 million for that. Then I had been advised that it would be proper timing to potentially consider offering or issuing working cash bonds at the same time. The working cash bonds would be the potential income or the money, the revenue that we would use for building a track in the future here at the high school, and some of the other things that would go along with that, lighting, fencing, the bleacher work and things like that, the football field too. So if we were going to do both of those projects, we wanted to get an estimate for how much money we would want to spend on that track project, even though that wouldn't start for a couple of years. So those are some of the guidelines that I gave Steve to look at, and so his task was to come and present some initial things to you so we kind of want to see what your tolerance level is for number-wise with the track. And so in addition to the money that he's going to talk to you about, you do have a packet in front of you. It's labeled on the top left, Vernon Jones, has some finance information in there about what we could purchase for between around $2.5 million. We know that sometimes there's extra costs involved, so he's going to price out working cash bonds at either $2.5 million or $3 million. There are a few pictures that are scattered out through the table. Sorry, my ink is a little bit off in color, but one of the sets of pictures is actually trying to show you the track with blue, but it doesn't look like blue. Sorry. The second picture is, yeah, really bad. It's trying to show you that there's a difference. There's actually a blue and a silver. Brian, I don't know if you have a better way to explain the difference with the exchanges in there.
Yeah, on a track, there's exchange zones. Historically, they were just triangles on the track, but the new fad is to paint those zones a different color, so it's very easy for athletes and officials to see the exchange took place inside the zone.
So when Steve talks about some of the money, we're gonna talk about those two amounts, the working cash amount and the HLS amount, all packaged together. We're gonna look at what your tolerance as a board is for the debt repayment timeframe, and then once Steve's able to hear what your tolerance is, then he's going to come back next month with a refined set of numbers for us to look at so we can start to move forward. So I think that's probably a good starting place.
All right. I do want to start off by saying I want this to be a dialogue. If you have any questions as we're going through things, don't hesitate. Just stop me right there and we'll answer the question at that time. There are some assumptions that we want to look at in all of these scenarios that I've produced and brought this evening. You have some that you were sent electronically before, and then there was a packet, should have been at your spot this evening when you got here, and I'd like to use the paper copy, and I'll tell you why. When you're looking at multiple counties, you've got McLean County, for instance, had your EAV at 170 million. Well, Piatt had it at 178 million, and that is the correct number. I don't know why it was so low, but my original numbers were done just pulling the McLean County, but we wanted to, be as accurate as possible, so we're using that 178 million number, and that's the number used for your EAV for this year. So your 22 levy year collected in 23. So that's the numbers that are in front of you tonight. Another assumption that we're looking at is your 2013 bonds became callable last December. To do them on their own, there's not a lot of economic sense to try to refinance them. There's not a lot of savings after you do cost of issuance and the like. So no, we hadn't done anything with that, but each of these scenarios this evening assumes that those bonds will be refinanced as part of this because there's savings to be had when you're sharing the costs across multiple issuances and restructuring for a purpose of trying to dial in your bond and interest levy. Now, of course, every year that's based on what your EAV goes up. And it could change from year to year. As you can see, the last 3 years here, you've had about 2.6, almost 4, and last year almost 6%. And that's in that growth rate column, the next to last column on the right-hand side there. So we're assuming that we're going to refinance the 2013 bonds. We have, as you'll see, a giant increase in EAV next year, and that's per a county clerk said to expect this, and that's approximately $39 million in EAV added next year. So for tax year 23, collectible 24. So that's why that number jumps from that 178 to 217 there. Then after that, we're looking at a conservative 2% increase annually in your EAV. Now, I know you've been going more than that, but we don't want to get too, ambitious here and have it not come in at those numbers. If we put 6%, let's say, and it comes in at 3, well, then you've overshot kind of what, your assumptions, and we don't like that, and we want to be as conservative as possible. So we use a 2% EAV increase annually after your bump next year with the wind farm, and it does not assume any other EAV increase in that. So it'll probably be higher than that 21.81% growth rate because of just everything else gaining value as well. But we think these are good starting places to look at these different scenarios. Does anybody have any questions on that? All right. The first scenario you have in front of you, we're like, all right, what if we're going to keep this at 10 years? What would it look like? And we added in, you see in the blue, actually, you've got black and white copies, so you don't have, we just didn't get blue right at all tonight on anything. I guess there'd be grade boxes on your copies. You'll see the proposed GEO School Bond Series 2023. And you'll see what all is involved in that is the life safety proceeds that Hillary explained of the $3.13 million. In this instance, for this scenario, we use working cash proceeds of $2.5 million for a total of $5.6 million in total new money for projects. Now, as part of that, there will be that refunding of the 2013 bonds, but we just wanted to show how much money the school would be netting based on these scenarios. And if you look out over, we tried to, using that EAV increase step, try to keep the bond and interest tax rate at a level number. So you'll see that over 10 years, it would take that from 46.5 cents this year to almost 65 cents. And that's a big jump there. Hillary right away goes, nope, I don't think that's sustainable. But we wanted to show it, to show you kind of where we stepped off. Because I was thinking, hey, let's see 5, 10, 15. Well, we ran 10 first, 5 we didn't even worry about. And then wanted to show you what we're looking at here. Your next page is, we're looking at 15 years in this time. And as you can see, your forecasted rate for this year is 46.5 cents. This is about 47.8 cents, so right in the same arena. And it'd probably be right closer to 46 after you factor in the valuation growth on your existing property. So you're very close to that and can pay that off in that 15 years, and that's netting the $2.5 million, as you see down at the bottom of the proposed GO School Bond Series 2023 column, working cash proceeds of $2.5 million. Now, these are based on rates as of a week ago. On 15 years, you'd be looking at a little over 4% for a 15-year bond. And I should explain that capitalized interest column is, as part of the issuance, some of the money will go towards an interest payment that will have to be made prior to your collecting a tax. So if we did this, say, in October, just to throw it out there as a date, there would be a principal or an interest payment due in June. Well, you're not going to have collected your taxes by then, so we include that amount in the bond issue to make that payment for you, because you don't want to go over a year. Investors will seek a lot more interest rate if you're going to be longer than a year on a payment. So this is a cheaper way to get you where you need to go by doing this capitalized interest, and that's also built into all of these scenarios. If you turn to the next page, this is netting $3 million for your working cash proceeds. And you'll see that it jumps up to about 49.5 cents. Now, this is only the bond and interest tax rate we're talking about here. You've got all your other operating funds as well that have their different rates. And, there might be some opportunity to manipulate a few of those, move them around to a point where you're still getting the money you need to have operations run as smoothly and efficiently as possible, but to make room for some of this extra rate you'll see here. And you can see it's really close to what you had in levy year 21, but because of that super growth, we'll call it, that's almost 6%, it brought that bond and interest rate down. Prior to that, all the bond issues have been done to try to keep that at the level bond and interest levy rate. But again, we were using conservative numbers, and that 6% bump, when I think we were using 1% when we did the last issue, took that number down. So that's what you're seeing, why your rate goes from 48.5 to 46.5, and then over 15 years, it'd be about 49.5 cents estimated to service that debt. Then we looked at a 13-year scenario using the same, that's the only change, was we reduced it to 13 years. And that put things at about 53 cents, we'll call it, throughout the life of the bonds. That's netting the $2.5 million for projects. And if you looked on the page after that, netting $3 million, it's about 55 cents, so about 2 more cents for that extra $500,000 netting for projects. And again, we can show any kind of scenarios you want to see. We thought this was a good, at least put it out there, kind of give you an idea of what ballpark you'd be in should you decide to move forward on these projects, and what you might be looking at with your different rates. As it goes to bond and interest. Now, this doesn't have any effect on any of your other operating rates. So again, you've got each year you do the tax levy, and you can adjust those as needed to accommodate, either an overall bond or a tax levy rate or whatever you need it to be moving forward. But we just kind of wanted to show what this would be, and again, just the impact on the bond and interest tax levy that you'd be looking at for the rate. All fees are included in these numbers, so this is out the door, debt service to the district. There are going to be no additions to it. Of course, these are estimates because interest rates move every day. I wish I could tell you what they were going to do tomorrow. I wish I had that crystal ball. I'd probably be on an island somewhere doing this by Zoom, but I don't have that. Conventional wisdom says that rates are going to stay pretty even keel here, maybe go up a little bit coming up, but near the back end of the year, they should start coming down again, is what everybody's forecasting now. If that comes to light, I don't know. But based on what we know now, these are the scenarios as I've laid them out for you here this morning, or this evening.
So I guess some of the things I wanted you to keep in mind, a health life safety survey needs to be done every 10 years by law. So when we're looking at this, really what's happening is we are putting both the needs and the wants, the HLS being the needs, the working cash for the track being the wants. We're putting the needs and the wants on the back of the wind farm. Okay, so this is not anything that's being paid by our taxpayers. It's all the wind farm that's paying this. That's a fantastic situation to be in. And we then want to consider what is the best way to do that time-wise. So one of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want that tax rate to drop so low that you then have to bring it up at some point. You want to be very careful. And we had more of a dip in our tax rate last year than anticipated because our EAV went up so much, which was not anticipated. So because the number that we were multiplying with got so large, it dropped that rate down because what you ask for in dollars. So our rate went down to 5.19 overall as our tax rate last year. So I want to make sure, in the year before it was 5.26. So I want to make sure that we're not dropping down too far. And I think if we go for a debt longer than maybe even 13 years, we're going to perhaps be in a danger area where it might drop down that low because our operating rates are going to drop down because our EAV is going so high. So that's why I asked Steve to go back, and because we were looking at 16 and 15, and I said, can we please start looking at 14 and 13? Which is a great scenario, right? To be able to think about paying off both needs and wants without going to the taxpayers and doing it in something relatively close to a 10-year time period. So I guess I'd like to have a little discussion on your end. What are you feeling like you're tolerating? If this is if you're understanding things well enough, are you on board with looking at a $3 million number for the track? If you've looked through some of the Byrne and Jones pieces, I am by no means telling you that I know exactly what we should do in terms of a track, but I will say that what we have in here with basically redoing our grass field with irrigation underneath and moving our situation a little bit to the west, and having new lighting and having a fence, moving the visitor bleachers west, probably doing a rehab of our home bleachers ourselves because the cost that they projected for us to redo our bleachers was astronomical, like the cost of the track. So if we did that separately, I think that would be wise for us. But we're looking at maybe a quote with putting in some of the soil conservation, soil pieces and excavating some things, probably about 2.4 million. We could do everything minus turf. It would be a grass field still. You say 2.4 million, things usually come in higher than what you anticipate, right? So I think 3 million would be a very safe place to upgrade the lighting, all the pieces out there, including the fencing, maybe even get us a little bit towards the Memorial Plaza, which would come next. And this is probably a start date of spring of 25. Because we have other projects for HLS that need to be done first. We just can't do everything all at the same time. So that's why we had Byrne and Jones come and give us some estimate numbers so you would know what Steve's numbers were going to buy for you. And so I want to know how you feel about 2.5 versus 3 million. And then once we know that, then we'll start putting people together that can talk about what exactly do we want that to buy for us. So how do you feel about amounts, and how do you feel about payoff timing? And how do we guide Steve when he comes back next month?
Just looking at the fact that we are going into one HLS cycle right now, in 2033 or 2022 or 2032, we're going to be going into another one.
Yes.
And do we have any other large capital improvement funds that are on the radar for the next 10 to 15 that would compete with any of these, the wants and needs for this?
Other than everything that's on the HLS list is
And that's covering all, I mean, the HLS list is pretty much going to be wiped out when we complete this.
all of the money is set aside for, yes.
Awesome. Thanks.
But there will be a whole new HLS list in 10 years. Yeah. And then we'll need further improvements. I don't know, I'm on the fence about spending $2.5, $3 million on a new track. I think we need to focus on the education of the students. I understand that you don't want the rates to drop because then you have to ask the taxpayers for more money. But I don't like paying interest on stuff. I just, yeah, I would rather, can we put it in a capital improvement fund, set the funds aside, and then pay for an improvement without interest?
I'll just say what my finance advisor, finance coach, former superintendent advises, and I was on the phone with Steve and on the phone with the coach and on the phone with another superintendent who had a wind farm situation come into his district, and this is the exact method that they advise, to go out for bonds and then put it in a structured format to repay. I understand the perspective, totally.
Hey, that's how I live my life. I get it. But you have to realize that rates right now, why they are going up, they're still at all-time lows. You know, if looking over the whole timeline of interest rates, and I know, you know, and from what you're saying, it's like any interest is bad.
Well,
But I mean, and I get it. You know, to keep costs down, to do the whole project at once, we've looked at people trying to, you know, do it as they can versus the whole project, and you know, of course, there's value to be had to, well, you've got all the equipment, manpower, you know, everything there to do the job. I
Yeah.
get it, but like I said, the interest rates are still at not all-time lows. That ship was here last year or the year before, and it's gone now. But it's still historically they're at low levels.
yeah, and you said that, not that you're predicting interest rates, but there's forecasted to go down at the end of the year too. Maybe.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just don't like the idea of spending taxpayer dollars on interest. I just think I mean, we've got all this other debt here that we could be paying off. I like the idea of low tax rates. I also like the idea of having a track for our students. Could we go to the community? Could we have the school, the people that want it, get more involved? Because I've asked around, I've heard very little support for spending money on a track. And I would love to hear more support for it so I could get behind it, but I haven't heard it.
It is part of the strategic plan. It was something that was mentioned on that day. It's been on the strategic plan, kind of waiting. I actually have a group that's meeting with me sometime this summer, I forget when we scheduled it for, about the Memorial Plaza. That's something that also has been on the wish list for quite some time. And like I said, we do want to have community involvement. We had to get somewhere for a starting place, so we knew what kind of numbers we were looking at. Then we can stop and go back and have more people involved with exactly what would that money buy for us, and how would that look. But we're talking about band, track, football. It's multiple programs that would actually benefit from it as well, and the community for walking on the track as well.
Sure.
And then if I may, when you talked about paying down other bond issues, bond issues have a call feature to them, so you really can't, you know, just throw more money at them each year. They don't work like that because the investors are expecting X amount of funds on these dates. So your 2020 bonds become callable 12/1/28. That's about the time that if you were putting money to get, throwing it to the back, then you could throw extra money at it and restructure it at that time. Your 21s are callable 12/1/30. So, 5 to 7 years out there still that you would be waiting to pay those down. I mean,
And
I
they're
know
at
a lot of them
nice
like,
low
hey, we
rate.
pay an extra 10,000 here, 20,000.
Sure.
But bonds don't work the same way as a typical, consumer loan that you might get at the bank.
Yeah, I appreciate you covering that because I'm sure a lot of people listening don't understand that either.
Yeah,
it's-
exactly. And that's just one of the caveats because bond investors, when they bought these, they're like, hey, we want our money out there X amount of time. And if they thought it was going to be shorter, they would ask for more rate. But these are locked in rates and nothing can be done, at least on a tax exempt basis. Now you could refund it on a taxable basis, which is a higher interest rate. And I know I'm opening up a whole can of worms here, but this is kind of where the conversation has led. So you could do it on a taxable basis, but then you're paying a higher interest rate. And even if you're putting extra money towards it, you're having to pay more in interest, and it usually doesn't make economic sense.
Gotcha. Appreciate the additional information. I do.
And I guess I'm just trying to help SIG, like trying to think of from someone who's newer to school financing. Here's a question to look at it from this angle. So if we kept our interest, our rate the same, our bond and interest tax rate the same, but we didn't have those bonds to pay, I'm trying to think of SIG's way of like, we have this extra money coming in. Can we just like build it in working cash forever?
You wouldn't be able to collect those funds because these are specifically being collected to pay off the debt. So if the debt wasn't there, you would just lose that rate.
So that's where I'm like, the
And
worry
then you'd
is
have to ask the taxpayers again to increase rate should you have a
to
project.
pay for that specific project. So that's where
So it's the
like,
difference of asking the public whether or not they want to spend money on something versus just doing it without their consent. That's where I'm coming
right.
from.
And the HLS is, I mean, not meaning for this to sound bad, but you don't have to ask for that. Like that is just something that you bond for, and it happens that way. When you can put, again, because we have a wind farm and the money is there, that's where we can use those funds. And it's not using all of the wind farm money. It's not like every single
Right.
penny that's coming in for that, because obviously some of the teachers know there was a very nice contract agreed to that we knew wind farm money was coming. So those kind of things were put into place. But that's where I'm like, I get what you're saying. Like in my personal life, we build up our savings and then we do a project, but it's like you won't be able to pull in that money if there isn't something there where it's
To pay.
identified for. So we can't just build working cash. I do know just from a long period of time, there have been multiple groups that have come to the district asking about, why don't we have a workable track? We have a lot at the junior high. Track has been one of the most involved programs for many years. We can't host a home track meet. I don't say this lightly, but we had a student athlete of the week recently on WCIA. It was a little more than embarrassing that when they were showing her on TV, you could see this girl is a state track champion, and here's our track.
What track?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here's our cinders
not
in the
maintained at
background.
all.
And, they're not even able to do that. Now, I get what you're saying, that, trying to look at the different options of like, how could this benefit more people? Would people get out and walk on the track and take care of it? And we would have the added expenses. For me personally, I look at the additional cost to put the taller vinyl coated chain link fence around that track. Yeah, we would need to make that investment in my mind, because I wouldn't want any young people to drive their truck out onto that brand new track that we invest a lot of money on. But if there's no fence, they're driving on that track. Like that's just real life. So, and there's many districts around that we can go to and you can see like what their tracks are. Hayworth is a good example in my mind. Their track is well used by their community because of that. Would it be nice if our marching band could host something? Yeah, that would be really nice. We just can't with what we have, and I get that. I get where you're coming from, but I'm like, I don't know where we just will never get there if we don't come up with more creative ways to make that track happen. There was a committee formed to fundraise money. With the amount of fundraising that would need to happen, it's just not there in our community to do that.
Did
You know.
did they go out and ask?
Yes.
I know it's a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not
They were,
denying that.
and it was people who I personally feel are really good at that kind of stuff. And there were different generations of people on that committee. It wasn't just, oh, everyone that's, 35. There was definitely like every generation you can think of. They were hitting a lot of different areas of the communities, businesses, those kind of things. We do have, very generous businesses here in town. Many of them are hit pretty hard from a lot of different angles. You probably know that. So, yeah, I mean.
So can you set the money aside earmarked for a program in the budget and build it without interest and then pay for the project outright, or is that not an option? Can you set the money aside earmarked for a project and then continue to collect those tax dollars so that you aren't paying interest on it in the end when you decide to do it?
But like Francie said, I can't collect that money. I have to only collect when I levy for money. When I levy the tax levy, I can only levy in so many categories, and those are all
Gotcha.
capped. And the only ones that are open, IMRF and Social Security and tort, those are the only ones where I can write in the dollar amount that I need. Everything else has a cap on it, so
Okay. So that's not an option.
it's not a
There
free
isn't
for all.
really like a working
No.
cash fund.
Yeah, well, so instead you just,
I know, it's a crazy way of
Yeah.
how it,
yeah.
Yeah.
And then you look at the cost of the project increasing over that time, you're setting the funds
Right.
away as well, which I've had some clients that have tried to do that, and they were just digging a hole and they couldn't get out of it to afford the project, because it kept going up incrementally higher than they were able to save the funds to do the project.
and I will say, like, when we first started looking at this, it was lower than where we are now, so it's definitely just continuing to jump. And again, I think it's important for the whole board to kind of think about where we want to move forward with that.
I have a question. I see the usefulness of a track, and I'm generally in favor of it, and I would lean more toward looking for more money. I would love to have track meets, band competitions here. My concern right now is, are we looking toward, and this may be part of that memorial area, we have to walk from the track to the school for bathrooms, stuff like that. Is that being addressed in this whole plan, setting aside so that we have facilities for a large number of people?
Right. That would be kind of the next piece. We're trying to build from the inside out so we don't step on
Okay.
somebody's work. So we decided that building the track and the fencing and all that area would go first. Memoria Plaza would be outside of that. And then at some point, I do see a concession, restroom, storage combination building. That would be, another piece that would be needed out
Yep.
there.
Yeah, I just feel like that would be an important piece before we can start major hosting
Right.
events. Okay, thank you.
So what you just said though, we'd build the track and it would be years later before we have restrooms and a concession stand?
I don't know how much later it needs to be. The track is the biggest expense. I just got another call from a wind farm the last couple days. Who knows what else is coming? But it would depend on the price of, I haven't priced out recently a concession building with a couple restrooms. I know that years ago they had talked to our industrial tech teacher at the time about building that building with the restrooms, at least our students doing some of that. So could that potentially, or part of that, be one of our jobs, that over the next couple of years we work on that? I don't think that necessarily has to be years later, because we could start planning for that as soon as we figure out what we're doing with the track, figure out where that would be placed next, but that would definitely be outside of the track space, so we have to get the track piece figured out.
Currently, Chelsea, because I don't know how many football games you've gone to, but, I mean, there is a concession there. There could be a better concession. Is it usable and doable? It is. JFL over the years has hosted, there's actually 2 concessions there. So if you hosted a larger event, you can pull from what is considered the high school concession and then the Little League concession. You can work out of both of those. I know when JFL has hosted larger, several years back when my son played, the JFL Jamboree was very large. And they opened both concessions to have different things out of those. And what was used at the time is there are restrooms. They are just up at the school. So that's what makes it more difficult. We don't have something right at the track.
Right.
You do have to walk across the parking lot. So there is a concession.
Yeah.
Could there be something different? Yes. Is it usable? Most definitely. I mean,
I have been to a football game.
okay. I'm like, did you even go to a football game? I mean, the track.
In my one attempt to make my kids like sports, it failed.
So
Question, but if we did the track and everything, is there any reason we wouldn't be able to host events immediately? Or would we have to wait until we had restrooms closer to the track? Is that a thing or a requirement?
I believe we'd be fine for a track.
We'd
I
be
think
good to go.
we're saying if we had a band event where we had 5 different bands, typically we would have all of them here at the same time. That's when it would be a restroom concern most likely, but not during a track meet or a football game. I don't think we'd have the numbers for that. That would be a concern. We could do more porta potties if we had to
Okay.
at that point.
And I will add that when you issue these bonds, when the funds aren't being used, of course, that they're in an account and they are earning interest as well. So
Like 5-6% interest?
right now, treasuries are about 5%.
Wow, that'd be great. We ought to just leave the
So-
money there
so-
and it'll
so-
pay more than the interest rate on the bond.
Well, see, you got to watch that. Government doesn't like that. But no, you'd have a small issuer exemption where you could earn what's known as arbitrage, so above your rate for 3 years. So that extra money would be there as well to throw towards the project. So it's not just sitting there and not doing anything. You can also put that into an account and have it work for you while it's not being used towards the project. And it's done on a kind of a spin down schedule, so have an idea of when the different bills are going to come due, and you set up to be as efficient as possible, set that ladder up to take advantage of the rates as they are right now. So.
what's your question?
I do like the idea of looking at the lower number on the track side, hoping to push some of this off for if we have other potential income increasing at the 5-year mark from this point. I feel like that allows us to space this out a little bit, as long as it's not going to be like what you're talking about, getting in the way of the other construction projects that would be going on, whether that's a bleacher expansion or some kind of add-on with that extra $500,000. We do have potential of more wind farm activity, and that would hopefully then cover that at that point in time as well.
Okay, so you're saying 2.5 million? Do you have any thought on the repayment timeframe?
I'd have to agree with Sid. I don't like owing money. 13 years is not as low as I would prefer to go. I love the idea of 10, but that shoots it up pretty high.
Oh, that number's scary.
Yeah, that's
They're probably going to just keep going up though, so maybe, I'm just kidding. That'd probably really make some taxpayers not happy.
Kenna?
It's the seat. It makes you not push the button.
I do think that it's important that we have a track. I've had a child in sports in the last few years, and, we go to a lot of different schools that have these beautiful tracks, and we don't have that here. So I'm not sure. I guess I would like a little clarity, because you're suggesting we go with the 2.5 versus the 3, and I guess I need a little more clarity on the difference with that. Because I'm hearing that the concern would be we wouldn't be able to pay for it potentially if the cost is higher.
my thought is, we're being very conservative on our estimates for, Steve has to, that's his job. We're being very conservative on our EAV estimates. When I'm looking at 13 years and 4% EAV growth, I'm looking at an overall tax rate of 5.2095. And that is very close to what we had last year, and that's giving us $3 million towards the track, paying it off in 13 years. And that's still under what our EAV increase was for last year. So I believe we can go 3 million. I believe we can do it in 13 years. But if the advice is to go with 2.5, I just know that there's more costs that always come in. We're trying to take a big chunk out of the cost by leaving our home bleachers there, but they have to be redone. The wood seats are not satisfactory right now, and I think we'd look ridiculous if we redid everything and kept the home bleachers the way they are. We're trying to leave them in the same location because that would be a huge project to move them. They quoted over $1 million to redo our home bleachers, and we don't think that's wise. So if we leave them where they are, but we redo the seating, which would be another cost, which is not calculated in here at all, that's why I think the 3 million number would be advisable to leave us space to do that project, then I think we would be much better off than spending the 1.1 million on what they propose to do for bleachers.
In my work with St. Teresa down in Decatur, they just installed a new football field and track, and they're overpriced. Their estimate is coming in their estimate was over $1 million under for what they needed to do, for what they ended up doing.
And there's your concession stand.
When we're looking at that 2.5, is that looking at already figuring on a 10% increase in materials? Like all our other bids have, they're buffering for 10 to 20% over what they think it's going to be, figuring on that prices are going up in process.
This, Brian, tell me if this is incorrect, but I believe what he's given us is a 30-day price quote, and if we sign on the dotted line, then that is something that they would agree to even if we start in spring of 25.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's
So
a
we
pretty
would
big
be
deal.
paying 2023 prices in 2025.
Correct.
Current prices are that great.
There's always the option, should you have, facility sales tax or something comes in, or whatever it is, to abate. So you can say, hey, we're gonna come out of pocket. I know that's not preferred, but if you have, the extra funds there, instead of throwing it towards the bonds, on the payment side, you can do it on the levy side. Not to throw an extra wrinkle in there, but.
Consider it wrinkled, I'm confused. You throw it on what do you mean you throw it on the levy side?
Say the levy is $100. You've got 20 extra bucks sitting here. You can say, all right, we're only gonna collect 80, spend that 20, there's your $100 payment. So you don't collect for that on the taxes.
Okay.
Hillary, because with all this, I would like to know exactly what is going into that. You said it was 2.6 million? Because there's a lot of options to add on. Does that include some of these options that are there, or what else?
Yes, and you can go through and add up, the things that you want, but the things that I thought were important, and we've talked to Brian, we've talked to the high school AD and some others. What I was pricing out was the 8-lane track with the 42-inch lanes. We did skip over the turf. We went to the last page with the alternates. I did include the new lighting at $239,000. We included to be honest, I can't remember if we did, I think I did the regular blue on the whole entire track at $25,000. I included the curb, but and I'm not sure how important a curb is at $58,000. The chain link fence, yes, at $178,000. We don't need the synthetic pad because that's for turf. We don't need the turf upgrade, obviously. The project survey, I put in $7,500 for that. The soil stabilization, you'll see that they recommend having a contingency for that. For the track, I went in the middle and called that $50,000. For the football field, I went in the middle and called that $100,000. And I believe that came in somewhere around 2.4. Brian, does
Okay.
that sound like the right number? So
What is the 6 by 12 inch interior concrete curb? Where's that at?
Yeah, I had,
No, I see it, but like, where's it at on the field?
is that right
on the inside, right on the inside of the track,
between the track and the grass?
yeah.
I haven't seen
Wouldn't that
too
be a
many
tripping
tracks that have-
hazard?
No, because it's not elevated, it's below.
Oh, well, when you say curb, I think like curb. Okay.
It helps,
Stabilize it?
yeah, it helps mowing, helps with some stability.
Well, yeah, because otherwise you have a hard surface and a soft surface, you're gonna get, so that probably would be important.
But they don't put it on the outside,
There,
because usually you have the fence right out there. That's what, I just haven't seen a lot of curbing on the tracks that we've been to, and that's up, what, 178? What was the curbing?
No, it's only
58.
58,000.
Only 58 guys. Okay.
usually the fence is up against the outside.
Hard up against the outside, but
Yeah.
that's a lot of money for,
And then we don't, and that's not including, hold on. There was another thing about grading.
Right, so that's where some of the extra, and I have no idea what the cost of,
Because it doesn't
removal of
give
some
us
of the
a cost.
dirt and, yeah.
But no, there was another page. Hold on.
Right here. This?
No, it was not the soil stabilization. I'm missing a page. How did I lose a page? Oh, it's underneath, sorry, guys. Price does not include grading the area inside of the track for the backfill.
Or rock breaking, blasting, excavation, removals,
Yeah,
yeah,
so that right there is hidden costs.
right. Thus my desire to think 3 million would be more reasonable than the 2.5, but just a thought.
do we know anybody who's done a track real recently? And that, I mean, is this where that cushion is of trying to build in that extra $500,000?
No, do I know an exact number for that?
No, I'm just
Absolutely
saying, have you been able to contact anybody who's redone one, thinking like, they started out with that budget and then it's like, hey, we didn't get this, this, and this?
not. No, I've not had time to do that yet.
Yeah, no worries.
In the long run, is it cheaper for maintenance to do turf versus grass?
So it requires maintenance.
It does, it's a different type of maintenance, it's a lot, yeah.
So which one is less upkeep overall?
Well, I would say turf is less upkeep, but it's an $800,000 difference between turf and grass. And, yeah, and there's a lot of other equipment, and it's not like you just set it and forget it. You do have to do stuff, not nearly as much as mowing and weed eating and stuff like that. But I think the consensus with coaches and everything all considered, it's not practical to go that direction. If we redid
Oh, yeah.
the soil and the grass and put in irrigation, that could be a very nice grass football field.
Mm-hmm.
That would be much easier to maintain than what we currently have.
Yeah.
I don't really like spending money, but I feel like we would be remiss if we planned for a track and field which are hoping to bring growth to our community and end up underbidding ourselves and having to cut corners and end up with a shoddy experience. I do think that is important to take note, because I think several of us here, our goal is to attract new families into the community so that our school grows again. And if this is our selling point and we end up cutting corners and something works out and it's just a sore thumb for us, I think that is something that we need to try and prevent.
We're not making any decisions tonight.
We're just giving feedback.
Yeah. So I think we're kind of liking the 13 years. I think we're kind of tossing between 2.5 and 3 million. And is there anything else that you would like Steve to run, other than run away?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
All right, and if there are any questions that come up after the fact, please let Hillary know then, and she can get in touch with me and be able to answer for you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move to communications. You have
All
one?
right, that would be me. So a couple FOIA requests. Communication with Lurie Children's Hospital, we had none. Communication with any vendors for diversity, equity, and inclusion, again, we had none. Marketing emails from NEM Ditch Marketing. And then also we had a email of support for having a district librarian that was certified from ISIL, is that how you say it? ISIL, okay. And then you have an invite in front of you, also on your board book, for Youth Mental Health First Aid. That's a course that was brought to the district a number of years ago, maybe 5 years ago. We probably had maybe 15 teachers that took that course. It was an after-school session for us then. But Tina Harrison is offering that at Outreach this summer on a Saturday. It's a one-day session from 9 to 3. If you would like to register for that, you can email her there, events@heritagenet.org. And we had, I believe, 6 or 7 teachers that expressed interest, and hopefully their schedule will work out that they can attend that. And I believe that's all the communication for this month. Please.
Just wanted to say that I think that this course is really important for leaders in the community to have. I think that it will help you understand the mental health challenges that young people are facing, and also give you very clear, specific tools that you can use to help address, and also to help educate other individuals in the community. So I think it's very much worthwhile. I like to see board members of all different boards taking this course. I think it's really important. And I think that to not consider it, would be just kind of missing a very important thing that our community needs. So.
And you've been an instructor for this before, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the curriculum. So, and Heritage, I think Heritage.
Yes, yes, I believe so. Yep.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very pleased when she offered it, and we had quite a few teachers that were interested in going right away.
Okay. Now we have committee reports.
We have none.
Easy. And administrative reports.
Okay, that would be me again. So wrapping up the school year, there's a lot of finance work that's done in the unit office at this time, closing up the fiscal year and getting ready to start the new budget work. And of course, the bond presentation that you've heard, that's been a lot of planning with Steve going on over the last weeks and months. And if you don't mind, I'll go straight into the strategic plan. So we have now had a full year of giving you 3-month updates on the strategic plan. I do that with the administrative team. We work on that when it's getting ready to be time to report back to you. So I'll highlight a few things from each of our 5 areas. Under community and district relations, one of the things that we've talked about is taking our newsletter in the past, a mailer was done, I believe, twice a year, U.S. mail, home. That was a large expense to send that home. We've done a lot of digital work since then, but it was mentioned to me that perhaps a newsletter could be copied off on a monthly basis and taken to some key points in our 3 communities. So, France, I know that you had told me that I could ask at the post office in Bellflower. That's the place to be in Bellflower, that maybe
Everyone goes there every day, so.
yeah, maybe those who are not online would be frequenting the post office, so I will make that connection. Mansfield, would the post office be kind of the same place where maybe those who are not online would maybe frequent, so they could take a look at a newsletter, perhaps? Question mark?
The library?
Okay, so library, maybe the bank, okay. Farmer City ideas, where do you think some people might?
AP Cools? I heard you guys.
What did you say? Oh.
Isn't there a laundromat in Mansfield as well?
Okay, Farmer City locations?
That's harder.
Okay.
The cafe? Do a lot of people go there?
Fish wagon on there. A lot of people go to the fish wagon.
Yeah.
Francie likes to go to Good Spirits
And Good Spirits.
for the tacos.
There was a lot of staff there when I went on a Friday recently. I just want to say, there was a whole table. Yeah.
Okay, so that's
Very
one
good quick
of my
sandwich.
goals, to get some copies in all 3 communities, and then to see if people take some and if they're reading. So we'll see if we can add to that. Webpage organization, so that's been brought to my attention. That's an ongoing work in progress. So just so you know, we work through a company called Aptigee, and we did a refresh when we're doing our network refresh. Part of that work was a webpage refresh, and so we do have a new face out there with our new logo, but new organization as well. I will say that I don't think, Dave, correct me if you want to, I don't think a web page, no matter how pretty it is going to be as user-friendly if the organization behind it isn't cleaned up, right? So that's been a job that's been on my shoulders for a while, and I'll say this, that when you're brand new in a job like this, and it's your job to organize everything at the same time, I wasn't organizing for my first year or 2 on the job, because I was just trying to do the job. And so now I'm trying to be better at organizing as I go, but I'm also, since the principals are sending out more things than ever before, and the district as a whole is, just so you know, every single announcement that goes out to the community has to have a home on the webpage. And I'm not sure if everybody realizes that, but every single flyer that goes out first gets linked to the webpage before it can go out. So they all need a home base somewhere. So if somebody just starts throwing things on there real quick before they send it out, it just gets messy somewhere, right? So then somebody gets to go back and put everything back in a folder, a file, a closet, a right space, and that takes a lot of time, So we're trying to be smarter going forward, but I'm still working on years of going back and trying to put things in the right file. So it's a big process. What I'd like to say is I think I might need another year to help continue to put things in the right spot, going backwards and going forwards. But I did ask, I work with Bush U Management, and they gave me an idea of Olympia has a very nice webpage. That was the one that stuck out in his mind. Maybe we'll look at another webpage, and if we have a big desire to do another total revision and pay for somebody to do that, then maybe in a year or so we talk about that. But yes, I know there's things that are just all over the place. I don't think that's an uncommon thing. I think most school districts would say that's one Achilles heel that we all have. We are told kind of on the monthly basis, oh, here is one more requirement that you have to have on your webpage. For example, this month it's you need to have an EHR officer, an employment history review officer, and that has to be in a prominent place. So we have to make up who that person is, and now we have to find a good place to put it. Everything nowadays needs a prominent place, but how many prominent places can you have? Just like how many corners can you have in a classroom when you have so many students who can't be near each other? Sometimes you run out of corners, right? So, yeah, so we'll keep trying. But it's known and noted. Finance, that's area number 2 on our strategic plan. all of this work that we're doing with the bond work for HLS and working cash is something that I continue to work with my finance coach, and I will be going to him before we hit the July meeting. Number 3 area, student achievement and curriculum. Grade level collaboration continues, grades K through 6, and we will continue to have more and more of a focus on data. In Mr. Huddleston's building, they are working on decompartmentalizing in grades 4 through 6, which means they're going to buy back more minutes for instruction because they're not going to be transitioning from classroom to classroom. And for the first time in many years, maybe not ever, but in many years, they're going to be able to have conversations with their teammates because they're going to be instructing the same thing. That hasn't happened for years on that side of the building, so I am absolutely thrilled about that. We will all be using iReady, so we'll be consistent with data. And another huge achievement, Paige has been leading the way with adding dual credit as she was charged during strategic planning, so 3 more classes next year, English 101, English 102, and FYE, which means first year experience, so basically organization for college, which will be taught by Casey Monsu here at the high school. Number 4 on the plan, facilities. So HLS work, we have things planned for 24 and 25 already. Architects and engineers are working on those things with me. And of course, you've heard about the track early stages. And number 5 on the plan is programs and services. One of those areas, Bert and Brian are working with their AD team. They have quarterly meetings, something that started last year, working on continuity with athletics between the 2 buildings. That's an ongoing goal for us, keeping coaches and keeping programs communicating to each other, and working on CPR training for coaches, communicating with the app SportsU, so we're safe in our communication, and then also increasing the importance and attendance at our parent meetings. So there is the strategic plan update. Any questions?
Okay. I lost my place. All right, Brian's not here. Mr. Huddleston, do you want to go next?
Good to see everybody this evening. Just have a little short report. I was glad to have a lot of staff members from my school here join us tonight. Speaking about track, that was a big highlight for us this spring. I don't know how much of the news came back through you guys, but our junior high, specifically our 7th grade boys, really shined quite a bit. We had Chase Ellis placing 8th in the 100 meter and 11th in the 200 meter dash. Braden Hollowell placed 2nd in the 400 meter and set a school record by over a second.
Wow.
Pretty amazing. And then those 2 gentlemen were joined by Wyatt Laidley and Landon Mattingly, and they were champions in the 4x100 meter relay. And all those points together gave us a 7th place overall for the 7th grade boys. Pretty awesome. Hopefully starting a new tradition in the spring. We had an 8th grade promotion ceremony during the day. It was very well attended. Had a chance to speak to the parents and students briefly. Got to share some awards from Mrs. Niebuhr and Mrs. Schneeman, kind of highlighting the accomplishments and things that they had done, not just that year, but their time there at junior high. And then ended up with a little cookout with a DJ, even the weather wasn't as cooperative that evening. It was a nice send-off for them. And then upcoming, we're going to have summer school starting on July 24th through August 3rd, and we're going to have roughly about between 20 and 25 students attending. Okay. Any questions?
Do you want to make any introductions?
Well, sure. We've got a couple of new staff members that we're hoping to add to our staff. Some nice experience. It's really going to help us out greatly. Raquel Eshelman is going to be teaching 8th grade ELA next year, and Carrie White is going to be one of our 6th grade teachers. And of course, Mrs. Cole Ross is joining us this evening too as our new student dean.
Great. Thanks for coming to the meeting. We always like when people show up. It's you. Yeah.
You may
And
approach.
you picked a really good one to be here for, because usually they're not this entertaining. So my report is pretty brief. We wrapped up the school year, graduation went off. Pretty great. No hitches there, I'd say. The only thing I wanted to comment on was, as I was going through my year-end numbers with discipline, I decided to include last year's numbers because sometimes you just have one set of numbers that doesn't really mean anything. What did that look like compared to last year? And I had been reluctant to draw those comparisons as the year went on because I really changed a lot of structures this year in how we went about working with discipline. So it was very interesting to see that our numbers were pretty much the same as last year, even though I felt like it was much more intentional about addressing things, and it could just be, we came up with a lot more creative ways to do it. The detentions, really interesting, the detentions were a little bit higher this year, but I went through and I counted our electronics detentions, which that was a new category for us with the cell phones, and there were 36 cell phone detentions. So if you took that number out of it, our numbers were basically 215 and 216 in the 2 years for detentions from last year to this year. So I thought that was interesting that those ended up being basically identical. But as working with ILT today, we see that we're going to have some new processes with our how kids are referred for different behaviors for next year. So I made the comparison. This year's numbers to last year's numbers were kind of like apples to oranges. Next year's will be like bananas. And I don't have any idea what those are going to look like. Eventually we'll get some stability and consistency so I can really say this is what it looks like from year to year. But definitely working hard to, try to help kids be successful. Questions? Sweet.
Okay, Paige?
Okay, you have my report. There's a couple things that I just wanted to highlight since I last submitted, my board report. I've been working on Title I, II, and IV grants, and I finished that today and just waiting on Hillary to take a look at. I've talked to the state today in regards to our ESSER III grant, and they're going to give us an opportunity to look at any remaining funds that we have from the initial grant that we submitted. It's kind of hard when they give you almost $1 million and say, okay, now just try to pretend how you're going to spend this in the next 3 years, not knowing what salaries are going to be, what resources are going to be available. And so it's nice that they're going to look at what we haven't spent yet and then allow us to reallocate that based on what our needs are. So I'm expecting to see that grant to reopen probably the beginning to mid-August. So I'll be working on that. Also been working on professional development and trainings. I have all of August done, September, October, and I'm working on January right now. So we have some really exciting opportunities for our staff, and I'm excited to see the feedback on that. And then finally, I've been working with Mr. Huddleston, Mr. Easter, Mrs. Diener, and all the science teachers I referenced in my report about the science curriculum. It's definitely a very strong need. Just having conversations and seeing what we're currently using, we definitely do not have the rigor that we need to be providing for our students. And as a result, I think we're seeing that as they go further, if they choose to do so after college, they're finding that they're behind in having to do some prerequisite courses. So I'm really hoping that with the adoption of the new curriculum, as well as providing the professional development and support for our teachers and giving that opportunity to collaborate like we've been doing with the ELA teachers. I'm anxious to see what that provides for our students. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So it's me.
Yep. Yes.
So did the state give us the answer we wanted, that we can backdate ESSER to July 1?
Okay. they kind of gave us the answer that we wanted. So what they said was anything such as kindergarten jumpstart and summer school that was already written in the current ESSER 3, then we can go ahead and pay those out. But any new items such as the science curriculum, and then there's some other items we were hoping to put in there, we will have to wait until that new allotted amount is approved. So not ideal, but it is what it is, I guess.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I have a question. You
Yes.
mentioned the new science curriculum.
Yes.
I'm just curious, what does that teach about sex being binary?
I don't think it addresses it at all.
Get into any of that for biology or anything?
No, I don't think that it's addressed. Yeah. I can look for you, but I'm pretty sure.
And
Would
if it was-
appreciate that.
Yeah.
If it was in the book, it wouldn't be.
I tried to find like samples online
Right.
from the website, and I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, I'll look at that, but I think that would fall under what we've already decided about with our health standards
Yeah.
that we just wouldn't address
Yeah.
Okay.
that. Yeah, that's a good question. Anything else? Okay, I'll get back to you next month on that.
Had the other reports in your board packet. And now up next is the approval of consent items. I did want to call attention to the workers' comp renewal and the PSIC renewal. It was in the paperwork that was here tonight, so it wasn't in our original packet. So you have paper copies there. But I need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items listed on attachment A as presented.
So moved, Chelsea.
Chelsea. And Jonathan. You guys, he's like, Jonathan. I was like, you guys are the only two people I know.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And now we're in old business. Review for approval of milk bid. Anything you want to talk about that?
No, we had only Prairie Farms that put a milk bid in, so it looks like we should probably go with Prairie Farms for 23, 24, if we want the kids to drink milk.
Okay. Barring any additional discussion on this item, I need a motion and a second to accept and approve the bid from Prairie Farms for milk products supplied to Blue Ridge CUSD 18 for the 2023-2024 school term as presented.
Motion.
Sig and Kenna. He was waiting.
Jason Nolan? Yes. Kenneth Dunlap Johnson? Yes. David Zager? Yes. Chelsea Loveland?
Yes.
Tracy Miller?
Yes. Okay. And now we have the review of the draft intergovernmental agreement with the City of Farmer City for the crossing guard. We had talked about this previously. but-
Talked about it in May, and we had decided to offer something for just 1 year at a time, 23-24 school year. We had talked about 30% coverage, and the City of Farmer City would cover the remaining 70%, and we're doing so because they're only allowed to levy so much, and with the increase in minimum wage, they were going to go into debt, and we decided as a safety team that it was important for us to have that crossing guard position at Snyder because it provides such safety for our littles. And so you have in your packet the draft that was given to me by Sue McLaughlin just for your review, and if you say yes to that, then I'll send it back her way for their board approval.
Okay. Any comments on that? Okay. Then I need a motion and a second to approve the draft language in the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Farmer City for the shared cost of the crossing guard for the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
So moved, Chelsea.
Second. Sig.
I feel like these two should not be able to see each other across the. Yes.
It's a skill.
So Chelsea and Sig.
Jason Nolan?
Yes.
Sig Enger? Yes. Kenneth Dunlap Johnson? Yes. Chelsea Loveland?
Yes.
Jonathan Yeagle? Yes. Francie Miller?
Yes. Okay, and now we're at new business, appointment of board members to board committees.
So this is coming back because we were a board of 6 when we made these committee assignments. So if you would like to lead them through, Francie, and decide if there's any changes that we would like to make.
I don't need to be on any boards.
Chelsea, I don't think you're on any committees. I feel like you should be on something. I'm assuming that everyone else is happy with the committee assignments that they currently have from a month ago. Now it's remembering who was on which things, though.
Was previously on policy and negotiations, and I would like to stay on policy and negotiations.
Okay, so that would put Jonathan, Kenna, and Chelsea on policy. Thanks for that, Chelsea. And then on finance, it would still just be me and Sig. Anyone?
I can get off policy and join you guys at finance.
You want to be finance too?
No, I said get off of policy and join you
Well,
at
you-
finance.
I mean, you could do both.
And negotiations?
You already have 3 on negotiations. Shh. And you won't need it. Right.
I know, I was on the last one.
You could do policy and finance.
Yeah, Chelsea, you want to do policy and finance? Okay, she will. She will what? She's going to do policy and finance.
Yes, Mom.
No, just policy and finance. Right, Chelsea?
Yeah, because the other was just a filler, it wasn't a real committee. Okay. And then the rest are going to stay the same.
Who's on negotiations then?
Me, Kenna, Sig, which doesn't even exist at this point, so that's who's on there.
Insurance?
Is
Kenna, Jason.
Kenna and Jason currently serve on that.
Right. Jason, Sig, Rusty.
And then Jonathan is going to serve as the IASB Governing Board Representative.
Whatever happened to our special ed representative at the regional meetings?
Yes. Yeah, there's not really a,
Do I need to step back into that role?
sure, let's figure out when. There's not really a set time where that happens like it used to be.
The last meeting I remember being at was right before I told everyone I was having twins, and they're almost 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't even know what those meetings are for special, we have a special ed rep.
Yeah, it was attending a tri-county board meeting. I'm not on the executive committee. I can't always attend their meetings, but I try by Zoom to go and just sit and listen. So if you would like to attend those
Yeah,
via Zoom with me.
yeah, I can do that.
I can do that.
Okay. So I need a motion and second to appoint the board members, as mentioned, to the Blue Ridge Community Unit School District Number 18 board committees for the remainder of the 2022-2023 school term and the 2023-2024 school term as listed. Jonathan?
Second.
Kenna?
Sig Inger? Yes. Kenna Dunlap Johnson? Yes. Chelsea Luckman?
Yes.
Jonathan Yeagle? Yes. Jason Nolan? Yes. Francie Miller?
Yes. Up next is the Bushu Agreement for Employment History Review Services.
Okay, so new in the Faith's Law trailer bill, every time we have an employee that is hired after July 1 of 2023, we have additional work to do to screen them for any sexual misconduct with a student. Part of that process, Bushu is offering to do for us digitally. So for example, if we were going to hire Mr. Huddleston, then he would be asked to certify that he has not had an incident of sexual misconduct at a former place of employment, and he would certify that he's giving us permission to check with all those employers, and then he would be filling out another form for every place that he works currently and every place he has ever worked previously where he's worked with children. So if he's worked in 15 different locations, he would have to fill out 15 different forms. And Bushu was willing to electronically send those to those locations that he has filled out. And then those previous employers have a 20-day timeline in which they have to respond back to us. That will come through our Bushu management system. It'll come back to myself and the unit secretary, and we will wait for those things to come in. If Mr. Huddleston has a teaching license, we also have to do a check in our system called ELLIS, our educator licensing place where all those are held, just to make sure that he's telling us honestly about what licenses he's held and where he's worked, and just to make sure he hasn't left something out. And so it is possible that we might not hear back from everybody, all 20 places where he's worked at a camp or this or that. And we are allowed to, with our discretion, once we've started and initiated the process, it could be possible that he would start his employment with us if other background checks that we normally do come back in and they're clean. He could start working, and we might have what we would call a hit afterwards, and then we would have to make a decision and say, sorry, Mr. Huddleston, you're relieved from your position. So starting in July, you'll see our motions for hiring look a little bit different. They'll have more language saying pending successful completion of, and then they'll start listing out some of those things. So this EHR, Employment History Review piece, is another, we understand it, but it's another burden in the hiring process for anybody who's going to be working with kids. So basically it's anybody, not just teachers. We're talking every sub who is not already a sub in our district, to a custodian, to a teacher, to a para, to a driver. So it's going to be a big process, and Bushu is willing to manage that for us. I believe the cost is $32 for each person that we hire to help us with the paperwork. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, so then I need a motion and a second to approve entering into a contract with Bushu Human Resources for employment history review services as presented.
So moved.
Sid? And Jonathan?
Kenneth Dunlap Johnson. Yes. Chelsea Levelman.
Yes.
John Diego. Yes. Jason Nolan. Yes. Sig Inger. Yes. Francie Miller.
Yes. Okay. Next, we have the GHR fee proposal for the high school duct insulation.
Okay, so this work is on our list for HLS at the high school. It's work that needs to be done on the roof. Currently, when you don't have duct work that is insulated well, you're losing some of your money for HVAC because it's being lost. We're not insulating well. This was applied for by me for a school maintenance grant because they offered one 2 years in a row. So we can have a match up to, I believe what was turned in, we might get about $24,000 back towards this project from the state. And this is work that can be done fairly quickly. So I've worked with the engineers, and this is this part of the process is saying that, yes, we want to work with the engineering company so we can start the process for this work, and the engineers have a 10% fee to go along with that work. So they do the bidding process for us, and GHR does a wonderful job with us, so we wanted to get your approval to move forward.
Any discussion? Okay. If not, I need a motion and a second to approve the fee proposal from GHR for the Blue Ridge High School duct insulation project as presented.
Seconded.
Jason and Chelsea.
Chelsea Levelman.
Yes.
Jason Nolan. Yes. Sig Inger. Yes. Kenneth Dunlap Johnson. Yes. John Diego. Yes. Francie Miller.
Yes. Okay. And then we have the GHR fee proposal for the high school chillers.
So same kind of thing, but a bigger project here. Right now, we're sitting in a cool building, but the high school actually is run by two different chillers, a 50-ton chiller and a 180-ton chiller, and they are on their last leg. So when the chillers go out, we never know if they're going to be able to get going again, because it's not something that we can, parts can't be replaced. It's so antiquated that you just can't replace things anymore. So we've been lucky that we've been able to baby them and keep them going. But I thought if things go out in May, staff might be able to tolerate it in May. If things go out at the end of August, it's going to be a real tough sell if things get really hot. We do have a waiting period problem with this. GHR is suggesting that we break this project apart and use a cooperative to purchase, when they are available, these two items. And they will help us do that purchasing and then store these pieces on site. They're proposing that we do then the bid work for the labor to install these chillers once the chillers are here and on site, and they're proposing an alternate bid to loop these two chillers together. And the best that I can explain that is to create efficiency. So if we don't need to run both chillers, we won't have to. We can run one or the other. So if we have a problem with one, or if we don't need to have them both, then we have a way for them to communicate with each other. So Sig, is that a good explanation?
Yeah, I talked to Jim about it to get a better understanding because I had very little, well, a little YouTube knowledge on commercial chillers. I mean, most of what we deal with is residential refrigeration. It's not big systems like this. So yeah, the way he explained it to me, that optional loop and autonomy of the two systems, redundancy, and then also efficiency there. And yeah, well, I'll stop there because it was quite the education. I don't want to burden you all with listening to all that.
Yeah, Jim's done very well for the district, and I trust that he's looking out for our best interest. And he's decided that doing that as an alternate bid, if it comes out, you know, if things for the labor is too high and we decide that we can't do that alternate piece, then we have the option to say no thank you if we need to. So that's why he's decided to split things up for us. So, but again, if we approve this, then we can get that project started. The quicker we can potentially get the purchase done for the equipment. And we're still looking at, this could be maybe 10 months away. It could be, or 11 months away before we get this project completed.
I do have concern, and I should have brought this up to Jim when I was talking to him last time, but I didn't think about it until now. But the purchasing of the equipment separate from its installation, are we going to have any problems getting somebody to do the work? Because sometimes companies want to provide the equipment and only install equipment that they want to provide. And I might have talked to Jim about this, and that's why they were leaning towards a certain brand of equipment, is because there are installers closer to here. I just don't want to end up sitting on a couple $100,000 worth of chillers,
Yeah,
and not be able to get anybody to put them in.
Yeah, I think he talked about having them come and approve of what was here.
Ah,
Yeah.
excellent.
So we didn't get caught in the middle with that.
That's great.
Okay. And I need a motion and a second to approve the fee proposal from GHR for the Blue Ridge High School chiller replacement as presented. Jonathan
Second.
and Jason.
Jonathan Gable. Yes. Jason Nolan.
Yes.
Hannah Dunlap Johnson. Yes. Sig Anger. Yes. Chelsea Loveland.
Yes.
Francie Miller.
Yes. Okay, next we have the authorization to expend funds in fiscal year '24 prior to budget approval.
This is routine, just we won't have a budget approved yet, and we want to be able to pay our bills in July.
Okay, so I need a motion and a second to authorize the district's expenditure of funds to defray necessary and proper expenses and liabilities of the district incurred for educational, operations and maintenance, transportation, or site and construction purposes of the district for fiscal year 2024, until which time the annual budget of the district is adopted in conformity with applicable section of the Illinois Student Code.
So moved.
Chelsea? Sig?
Jason Nolan.
Yes.
Sig Anger. Yes. Hannah Dunlap Johnson. Yes. Chelsea Loveland. Yes. Jonathan Gable. Yes. Francie Miller.
Yes. Okay. And next we have the approval for the superintendent to create the fiscal year '24 budget.
Yep, so somebody gets that job, and may I please have permission to create the budget?
If you vote no, you have to do it.
Yeah, so be very, very careful.
Okay, so I need a motion and a second to authorize Dr. Stanifer to develop a tentative budget for fiscal year 2024.
So moved.
Jason? And Sig.
Sig Ingram. Yes. Hannah Dunlap Johnson. Yes. Chelsea Lockwood. Yes. Jonathan Yeagle. Yes. Jason Nolan. Yes. Francie Miller.
Yes. Okay, next we have the library policy draft.
And again, there's no action sheet in there. That was something that was presented to you tonight when Anita Beeman spoke. And so I like the fact that we've worked on this with our committee for so long. I feel like we're kind of ahead of the game, and now it's a good time to hold and just wait and watch and see what happens. And then I had kind of guesstimated that maybe by September, Anita would come back and we'll see kind of what the advice is. And I think we'll be ready to kind of follow what the guidance is at that time. So.
Okay. Next, we have the approved memorandum of understanding audio recording.
Okay, so part of the network refresh, we have cameras that are in the building that have some audio capability, and the union approached me and said that they felt like that was a change in working conditions. And so union leadership and myself, we worked together to talk about, you know, what would make them feel more comfortable and confident that we weren't using those cameras to see what was going on in their classroom or to use that inappropriately. So you'll see the language before you. Video footage from security cameras will not be used for evaluation purposes. Video footage from security cameras will only be used in disciplinary cases as supporting evidence. In such cases, the union will have the right to view the video for purposes of representation. Video will not be used in classrooms without agreement by the teacher. So that is something that the union is agreeing to, and if you do as well, and by the way, the board attorney has agreed to that, and if you do as well, then you can choose to sign that paperwork.
Is there any discussion? Okay. So if not, I need a motion and a second to approve the MOU with BRFT regarding audio and video recording as presented. Jonathan? Sig.
Hannah Dunlap Johnson. Yes. Chelsea Lockwood. Yes. Jonathan Yeagle. Yes. Jason Nolan. Yes. Sig Ingram. Yes. Francie Miller.
Yes. Okay. Up next, we have the approval of the 612 science curriculum.
And for this action sheet, I copied a lot from what Paige had given you in her report. And in there, she did say that discussions began in the fall of 2022 regarding the need for aligned science curriculum. I will say that before Paige's time, it had been a point of discussion for a number of years. So back to the days where I was in that position, that was also a need. So it's been a need for quite some time. So she's done a wonderful job bringing together many different things. She looked at Open Science Ed, McGraw-Hill, Savvis, and brought all of those things to the team of teachers and administrators to look at. So I'm very pleased that they're looking at rigor, they're looking at continuity. Is it a large cost? Yes, but we're in a good spot where we have the ESSER funding right now, which is going to dovetail nicely into what we're doing with the wind farm increase that we have that's coming in, which is going to come across all of the pots of money that we work with. So I think this is a good time to address that need. And the question that I asked Paige about the news from the state, what that means is that most likely this curriculum is not going to be ready on August 16th when the kids step in the building, unfortunately, because of the way they want to close out that last ESSER grant. They have to wait for all across the state. They have to wait for those expenditure reports at the end of June to all be turned in, and they're giving us 3 weeks to do that. And then they have to do their processing to say, boom, every district, here's what you have left. So we didn't have this in the works in our plan 2 years ago. So because of that, we're going to have to wait until about that August time. So and there could be a request from the company. Could we have teacher licenses? Could we have, something ahead of time? Could there be a small purchase while we're waiting? That could be a reasonable thing that we could do to help them get through. Yeah. So this is a action sheet to approve the purchase of the curriculum, even though it might take us a little while to actually purchase all of it.
Any discussion? Okay. If not, I need a motion and a second to approve the adoption of Savas Science for grades 6 to 12 and the purchase of the Savas Science teacher and student curricular materials for the same grades for Blue Ridge CUSD number 18 as presented. So moved. Kenna? Second. Jonathan?
Chelsea Levelman. Yes. Daigle. Yes. Jason Nolan. Yes. Sig Inger. Yes. Kenneth Johnson. Yes. Tracy Miller.
Yes. And next, we have the discussion for approval of letting bids for district bread.
Yes. Can we go out for bids to buy bread, please?
If there's no discussion, I need a motion and a second to approve letting bids for bread products supplied to Blue Ridge CUSD 18 for the 2023-2024 school term as presented. Sid? Thanks, Chelsea.
I was gonna say, I thought I heard you.
Oh, is it Jason? Those low voices.
Tail.
Not good. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Sounds good. Okay, and now I need a motion and a second to move from open session to closed session for the purpose of appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district, and ongoing pending or probable litigation at, oh my gosh, 9:03 p.m. We are supposed to be coming out of closed at this time. Okay. Chelsea. Krista, you signed up for the wrong month to cover.
Chelsea Levelman.
Yes?
Sig Inger. Yes. John Daigle. Yes. Kenneth Johnson. Yes. Jason Nolan. Yes. Tracy Miller.
Yes.